exhausted. It has been a day. It has been a week. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the first show of what I think is going to be a doubleheader of the Mike the New Haven podcast. We don't have a guest yet for tonight, but I'll talk about that later. It's episode 224. If you haven't checked out episode 223, that was I highly suggest you watch it in parts. It was a great show, but it's the longest show I ever did. Because my guest had a lot of stories. So he broke the record. I thought Don Sadawi from the Bomb Squad was going to hold that record, but his record stands no more. That was Pat Pogan for volume 23 of the event inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. And for those of you in the chat, you know my next guest quite well. You see him all the time because most of you that are subscribed to this channel are also subscribed to his channel. And who is he? Well, if you don't know him, my next guest is a man who has grown to be a prominent figure in the true crime community. And the reason why is because he has a legitimate background in it, unlike most. He's a retired detective. He served 20 years between the New York City Housing Police first and then the NYPD when the departments merged in the spring of 1995. And since he retired, he's developed quite the following on YouTube. You know him by DutyRon, of course. His channel now has well over 100,000 subscribers. I think you're closing in on 140,000 upon last check if you haven't passed it already. And that, well, is DutyRon, who joins me now on the Mike the New Haven podcast. Ron, welcome. How are you?
Mike, thank you so much for inviting me to come onto your podcast. I enjoy watching all your replays and seeing all the great work that you do. And I appreciate you. I'm honored that you asked me to come on with you.
Well, I'm glad that you did. I mean, the pleasure is all mine, of course. I know you're a busy guy, and I figured, he opined so much in the cases of the day that let's go back and see what his background is. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit in your show, a little bit with Bill and Mark previously too, but I think today we can get the definitive look at your career. And before I get to that career, tell me, where'd you grow up?
Mike, I'm a Long Island kid, but I grew up on the border of Queens and Nassau. So I on my bicycle back and forth into Western Queens and Eastern Queens and Western Nassau County. So,
did you grow up around the job?
I did not. My dad. There's no bloodline in the family other than like a distant uncle that was a lieutenant on the job. But my brother and I are it. We're the ones who started the Licciardi family in policing.
So were you one of the guys that took all the tests, or did you just take the police test?
Mike, I took it was one test for all agencies. So I didn't go around and take sanitation, fire department. I wanted to be a cop. I took the police test in Nassau, Suffolk, and NYPD, and a couple of Westchester ones. I believe New Rochelle called me, and also Mount Vernon.
Right. The adjacent counties as well. We're talking with Ron Licciardi. Of course, he is frequently on YouTube he frequently posts on YouTube under the name DutyRon. His channel is very popular, like I said in my introduction, well over 100,000 subscribers, and we're happy to have him on the show. Happy to have you guys in the chat as well. So coming on to housing, I mean, listen, as you said, you were a Long Island kid. Did you have any familiarity at all, at least prior to, of course, going into taking the test with the housing police or with the transit police?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Mike. Through friends and through people who I knew that were already on the job, they said the NYPD was the one that you wanted, and then transit, and then housing was the last. If you were to get selected for housing, that you were at the bottom of the barrel. But I will get into, once we start speaking about that aspect of it, how that worked out for me.
Yeah, it was a great department. I mean, I remember, maybe you remember him because he went to Housing Rescue and then to ESU when the merge happened. John Latanzio was telling me when he was on this show that it really was the best kept secret, he felt, because you
stole the words from me, Mike. You stole it right out of my mouth. That was the next thing. That was the next thing I was going to say. But before I get into this little bit of how I got on the job, and I'll keep it real simple, I want to say hello to everyone that's coming in from the share on Crime Time with DutyRon. I see a lot of people in the chat. I want to thank you guys for coming out here to support Mike Colón on his podcast, Mic'd Up in New Haven. This guy has some of the best guests. I don't know how he does it. Just people from everywhere. And he's got a real knack for getting some great guests. And if you go and look at his playlists, I mean, they are plentiful, over 200 podcasts, 200 shows, if you will. He's got some great guests. But so here's how it went down. I took the test. I got called down to Jamaica. I think it was the crime lab at the time. And it was a big, long line of us. We were waiting outside. And as we were getting closer up to the table where all the police officers were, they were like, I heard it. You heard the cadence. Okay, NYPD. housing, NYPD, transit, NYPD. And when I got up to the thing, I was nauseous because I didn't want to get that dreaded housing. And they would go, Licciardi, housing. And I was like, oh, no. And I'll spare the curse, but it was a curse word that I let out. And I was like, yeah. And they took us to a separate room downstairs in like a sub basement. And we sat down in a small classroom of maybe 12 to 14 recruits. That's all that they chose from where I was. And they were like, welcome to the best kept secret in the in New York City. Housing Police Department, we're a family. And it came true. It was true, true through and through. And I still love my housing brothers and sisters. They're like family to me.
Which PSA did you start off in? Two, PSA 2. For those that don't know where PSA 2 is, that geography, where is it?
It's East New York and Brownsville, some of the most busiest commands in Brooklyn North. As a matter of fact, the first year that I came out, which was 1991, we had 2,200 homicides in New York City. And out of those 2,200, over 350 were in the 7-3 and the 7-5 precinct. Those are the two of the commands that my PSA was right in the middle of. It was right on Sutter Avenue, 550 Sutter. That's right between the 7-5, which is 1,000 Sutter. It was a war zone, put it quite lightly.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that era, the 7-5, the model still applies today, but even more so then was the you give us 22 minutes, we'll give you a homicide era of the 7-5. So, I mean, and it was because I think, and the thing that makes it the most shocking, or at least back then it was shocking, is that the geography, the area of the 7-5, what is it? Only like a square mile, right?
Yeah, it's a few square miles because up north off of Fulton Avenue, it goes up pretty high. So it's got a decent geography, but it's not huge. It's not huge, but the amount of crime that happens in that small condensed area. Same thing with the 73rd precinct, just a little bit bigger, but the numbers. If you look at ComStat, that dreaded ComStat that a lot of your executives that you have on talk about, the shootings, the 5 major crimes, they all are all through the roof in those precincts. I don't know how it is now. I'm out over 10 years. But the bottom line is that, for a rookie to come out, because in housing, it's not like what you think, police patrolling in cars. We're on foot. We're up in the communities. We're in the developments, as they call them now. We called them projects when I first started. But when you're up and in the developments, you got to get to know who the players are. You got to get to know what you're doing. And it really was a lot. We didn't get the same field training that the NYPD got. It was really just in-house, and you were out with select few people, the field trainers, and that's where you get your in-service training. It was interesting. My first night, just so you know, Mike, was Halloween night out on patrol. So it was a doozy, to say the least. Shots fired, person shot. We had domestics. We had emotionally disturbed person calls. It was a night that I'll never forget, and it scared the pants off of me. That's for sure.
I can imagine, because I was going to say, you guys had RMPs, obviously. It wasn't like transit, you were strictly underground. But you guys, and I talked about this previously with our mutual friend, Scott Wagner, you guys were really the last of the community cops. Not to say that community policing has gone away, but community policing in that particular style, not only did housing originate it, but I think that era of it started and it died with housing when housing died in 95.
Yeah. The hostile takeover, as they call it, in the Giuliani era. But when Giuliani became mayor, he took crime back from the city. He allowed the NYPD and the transit and housing bureaus, they combined, but he allowed everybody to make arrests on the street, narcotics arrests especially. So when his administration took over, he kind of lassoed in. He actually let us do our job, but he lassoed in crime. He did an unbelievable job. I mean, we obviously did the work, but he gave us the blessing and was behind us wholeheartedly and 100%. So it was really good. But I did get to see it during the Dinkins administration and the Dinkins era. That was when Mayor Koch was on his way out, and then I came onto the job. So it was Dinkins first, and he had that Safe Street, Safe City program where we hired, 2,500. I was in a class of 2,200 recruits. So at the police academy, the old one in the city, I sat there, toe to toe with guys in the locker room, and there was no space for anything. But he was pumping out classes after classes, 2,000 at a clip for, a good period of time. So we bolstered the NYPD to up over 40,000 members. So it was unbelievable. So.
And I'll get to a little bit, later on with the merger of 95 or the takeover, as you said, in 95. But during that time, so much was going on in terms of crime, but you were starting to see the flip. Even when Ray Kelly came in that first time, he did pretty well in the short time that he was there. People remember him more for the second stint because it was a lot longer. But in the short time he had the first time, he did quite well. And you started to see the evolution of housing around this time. You guys got your own emergency service unit. You started to get a little bit more fancier offices for the detective bureau. So they were starting to not treat housing like the stepchild, if you would, anymore. So during that era, what are some of the best arrests you can recall, the best collars or calls you can recall?
I'm going to circle back to that, Mike, and I don't mean to throw you off. The only thing
That's
that
fine.
we didn't get was the housing aviation. We always wanted to get that, right?
And you had the money because you were federally accredited too, so you could have afforded it.
Yeah. We were accredited. Transit became accredited first, and then under Bratton, and then we got accredited as well. I want to just talk to you quickly and to your audience mainly. One of the motivating factors, or several of the motivating factors, of why I became a police officer. So, you asked me where I grew up, but I grew up in a family, a broken family. My parents were divorced when I was young. So my mom and dad split up when I was a kid, baby. I don't even remember a lot of the turmoil that went on, but my sister told me about it. I have some, distant memories of some violence in the home, throwing a Christmas tree through the front window. My father in an argument with my mom, never put his hands on us or my mother, but it was a rough growing up for me. So as a young kid, I grew up with my mom and my grandmother, and my grandmother died at 101, 1 month shy of 101. So she raised me with, my brother and my sister. My brother became a lieutenant on the police department. So when we were growing up, it was just my mom and my grandmother. So there was no father figure to kind of guide me or, reassure me. So what happened was, when I became, like, say, a young teenager, I became friends with an older man that was 2 doors down, and his name is Pal. We called him Pal. And he was a Mr. Derek, but I called him Pal. And my brother and I, all the kids in the neighborhood called him Pal, because he used to sit on his front steps and he would tell us stories about his job and about all of the things that he did. And he wasn't in law enforcement, but he was just like one of the people that you'd go to. And one of the kids, so we looked to this guy, Pal, for, and he would tell us, being a civil servant is one of the greatest things. You get a good pension, being a cop, maybe you might want to think about that, and talk about fire and all that stuff. So to make a long story short, and to fast forward this thing, one of the kids who was like 4 years younger than me, so I was like about 17, fast forward to 17, he was like 13 years old. He was part of the Pal group. All the kids from the block would get together and come and hang around Pal and talk to him. And he got murdered. He got stabbed to death right around the block from my house. And at that time, I was able to drive. I had my permit, and I went to driver's ed, and I was able to drive at 17. So that night I was driving around the neighborhood. I had a 73 Camaro. I'll never forget it. I drove right past where he was stabbed and left on the sidewalk. And that really, really took me to the point of, like, I need to go into law enforcement, because I wanted to find out who did this to him. And comes full circle, it was one of his friends that was smoking PCP. He was on drugs, and he killed him. He stabbed him in a fight, a verbal argument. And I talked about this on my channel. And the guy who stabbed him lived right down the block. So I knew this person. And he went to jail. He did time, and he got out. And he's now functioning with a family out, and this kid's dead. And the kid who he killed, his name was Irwin, and he used to look up to me too. And he used to say to me, "Yeah, you would be a good cop. You should be a cop. You should be a cop." So all of these things, combination, cumulative together, was one of the pushing factors. My father not being there, relying on Pal and some older figures, and then seeing what happened to him. That's what made up my mind that at 26, I was going to finally take the job of being a New York City police officer. So that I wanted the audience, I wanted some of your folks to know, that's what got me into the police game. And that's always been my thing that I look back on. I look at that and look at how this guy helped me, Pal, and how I want to help other people. So I continue to do that. So your question was my first arrest? Is that what you were asking me?
Or one of the more notable arrests, but actually I can flip it a little bit because, and thank you for telling that, because it came to my mind, and this you did talk about on your channel as well, but we can get in depth on it. One of the collars I believe you made was somebody that had shot an off-duty cop.
Yeah.
If you remember that story. So tell me about that one.
Yeah. So at that point in my career, it was like about 2 years into it, maybe 3. I had an RMP seat. I had a seat in a car with a regular partner, and we were down on Livonia Avenue in the 7-3 precinct. And we would, at that time, there was no 911 verify. Like, in other words, it was anonymous and unverified always. We didn't have that reverse lookup 911 system at that time. So we would get these routine calls where, these perps would call in, cop shot when it really wasn't, and they would just get a kick out of seeing all the sirens and lights coming, and it was just an unfounded call. So it was an early morning. I don't remember the day. I think it was on the weekend. It was either a Saturday or Sunday, and it might have been during the week because he was dropping his daughter off at the athletic center, the PAL center down the road. So we're sitting on Livonia facing the location, and a call comes in. It was a quiet morning. I had a cup of coffee. My partner was reading the paper. He was driving. We get the call and we go, it's, police officer shot, but it said numerous calls, and it said it was coming from that PAL center. So that right away, coffee out the window, lights, and then just, 2-3 blocks, boom, we're there. And there's people out front pointing. So he had dropped his daughter off and 2 or 3 young kids, teenagers, like 13, 14, and 15, I believe, stuck him up for his shearling leather jacket. It was a popular item at the back then. So he went, gave it to him, and then he had a fanny pack. He grabbed his gun out, engaged in this gunfire with these guys, and he was hit, and he staggered with his daughter. They were shooting at him while he was with his kid, and he staggered into the PAL center. So we wound up responding. I went in there. He still had his gun and his badge in his hand. We took him, put him in the RMP, rushed him to Brookdale. And the doctor and everybody that was there said that we saved his life. He wouldn't have lived if we didn't get him there and apply pressure to that wound, because he was shot in his artery in his leg, and he was gushing blood. It was bad. I didn't think he was going to make it, but that was an unbelievable day. And what was even more unbelievable is several months later, he came back to the PSA in walking with a limp, with like a crutch, cane. And he had, I think it was an 888 precinct he worked in. I'm not sure. It's a long time ago. But he had an RMP, marked NYPD RMP, come to the PSA. And he came in and hugged me, thanked me. And, it was unbelievable. I believe his name was Eddie Vera. But, that was an unbelievable experience. I also had another one with an off-duty in a 7.5 as well, shot in the subway by a robber. The guy tried to take his jewelry, all stuff, and he engaged them. So I had a couple of those. They're scary, that's for sure.
And it's not the only type of collars, obviously, that are the most dangerous. I mean, of course, the gun runs are always dangerous, man. With the gun, you just don't know what to expect. But look at what just happened in Bristol. Domestics too can turn on a dime. So going to those, where it's a lot different for the housing police, or at least it was back then, because for the most part in these PSAs, they know you. I mean, maybe they know their precinct cops too in the NYPD, but with housing, as you were saying, it was really up close and personal. So that can help you, but can it also exacerbate the situation? Because the best part is they know you. The worst part is they know you. So tell me about those, because I mean, that's the part of community policing people don't really see.
Right. So because a very good question, Mike, and because we were community police officers on foot in the communities, we couldn't really hide. You had to be out there. So there's a lot of different tactics that you were taught by the senior officers, by our field trainers. But, we got to get close with tenant patrol. And in New York City housing, there's a thing it's a tenant patrol, and it's the people who live in the building, and they're supposed to be in the lobby, and there's people supposed to sign this tenant patrol log. That was like not happening quite well with the bad folks, with the drug dealers and the bad guys. But these older folks, and I could say older folks now because that's me now. I'm on older folks, right? But when I was 26, these older folks, I looked to them for info. I looked for them for, safety, to, find out who the players were. And you couldn't rely wholeheartedly on these tenant patrol folks, because they had to be there and not get themselves killed, right? So the way they would talk to you would be out of the side of their mouth, or if you'd be walking up in the stairwell, they would be like, "Hey," and then they would come up to you and talk low. You got to watch out for this one. So a lot of it was done behind the scenes. Like none of it could be obviously out in the open, but we would look to this tenant patrol and the people, and we would go to the community board meetings and we get intel on who the bad actors were. But Mike, more so than that, what I did, and not probably all cops did this, I went around to the anti-crime. I went out to the plainclothes guys, and I went to them while they were in the PSA. And that was the great part about housing, is that you can approach these guys. I got word that in the precincts, they weren't as approachable. Not saying that they weren't approachable, but it was just a bigger setting. A roll call to 7-5 on a 4 to 12 is 200 cops. It's like an army. So how are you going to take uniformed personnel, and how are they going to all go over to the anti-crime and start getting info about the bad guys? So in housing, it was smaller. It was a family, and that's where this family grouping comes into play. Whereas these guys that were in plain clothes would be like, "Hey, kid, don't go by 3:30. Do them on at this time, because we're going to be doing something over there, or watch out for this one and this one." And we'd be able to look at pictures and identify the bad actors and know who they were for our own safety. And I think that was one of the primary reasons why we got through with such little guys getting hurt and guys getting killed, guys and girls, because we had a lot of intel sharing, and that was good, and I thought that was a really something I learned right up front from one of the older guys. His name was Freddie Witcher. And I learned that on October 31st when I came out in 1991. He said, "Stick with me, kid, and listen to what I got to tell you." And I listened, because I didn't want to get killed. We don't take the job to get killed. Take the job to do, protect and serve, right? You got to uphold that oath. And to do it, you have to do it with safety, and with, your safety first and foremost, and then the safety of the public, because you can't just go out there being a gunslinger. It just doesn't happen.
Right. And I was going to say, that time when you came on, literally the month before you came on, Hector Diaz was killed in the Bronx chasing a perp into a corner, and he was shot and killed. And I believe the next year, Hilario Serrano, a few months after, in January of '92, was killed. And housing suffered some losses during that time, too. Paul Heidelberger, trying to break up a fight off duty, was shot. Rudy Thomas was just sitting on his motorcycle, minding his business. John Williamson was trying to break up a riot, and somebody threw spackle off the roof and was killed.
I was on duty for Rudy Thomas. I responded to that crime scene. And I'll tell you, that was an unbelievably heinous crime that was committed there. He had his girlfriend on the back of his motorcycle with him, and he was shot and killed right across the street from his home on Pennsylvania Avenue. He lived in the projects with his brother and his grandmother and his mom. And when I saw that, I mean, that, amongst, obviously we're going to get into Kevin Gillespie and so forth, but I was also on duty when Williamson was killed in PSA 3. He's a housing cop and was a young guy. And someone just maliciously threw a bucket of spackle off the roof. And that was also one of the first things that I was taught, is always look up when you're approaching, and always look up when you're leaving the buildings. Because
airmail.
I had airmail thrown at me, a bowling ball. So
Jeez.
that would have hit me. It would have been, would have been the end of you. That's going to kill you. Also, one of my friends who I worked with had a air conditioner thrown off the roof at him. So. Yeah.
Wow. It really was the Wild West, wild West back then. I should say. I'll ask you, the specialized units, like I said earlier, were starting to sprout up around this time. You got Rescue in 1993. And even though they didn't last long, they ended up getting absorbed by the NYPD ESU in '94. Just in general with the specialized units. Did that aspect of the department ever attract you, or were you just happy where you were at that time?
I really enjoyed patrol, Mike. I worked patrol, and I worked midnights for a great deal of time, because it worked in conjunction with my kids and my family. So like, I would work the late tour, and I'd come home, and my wife would go to work, and my mother-in-law would come over, let me sleep a little bit, and then I would watch the kids. So it worked for my family life, that late tour. And I did have the opportunity to go into anti-crime, plain clothes. And I did eventually go and work that once my kids were a little bit older. And I worked in the when we merged in a parole joint NYPD task force. So I worked plainclothes for quite a bit of time before I segued into housing. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my first arrest, because this was an interesting one, and it involved our good
Please do.
friend John. It involved our good friend John Cutter, who retired as the deputy chief, right? John, I introduced him to, I think, his second or third wife. So she worked at the PSA with us in PSA 2. But let me digress. So my first collar was obviously in field training. So I was with 2 seasoned cops and a group of us, rookies. And we went into the Fiorentino houses, which is in the confines of 7-5. And we were doing a building check. And a building check, for the people in the audience listening, consisted of going in through the lobby, take the elevator up, and then you walk down the stairwells. You go down each floor, meet and see your partner, make sure that they're okay, then down to the next, meet. You come out in the hallway, pop your head out. That's how we were trained to do this. So we were doing that, and in the process of doing that, I heard a commotion. I think it was on the 2nd or 3rd floor of this 6-story development, and it had a small little elevator. Some of them you got to walk up, but this one had an elevator. So we were coming down, and I heard like commotion, sounded like an argument. So being a rookie, I was like, oh, maybe we got something here. And so I radio to my field trainer. He comes and meets us, and now it's like 5 or 6 of us field trainer, rookies, and then the 2 field training cops. So they're handling the whole thing. They're up to the door listening, and they were like, "This is an empty apartment. That's a housing burglary." So that's like a big collar in housing when you catch someone inside a vacant apartment, or if they're squatting in there. They call it a housing burglary. It really was just, Anyway, so it was a group of young kids inside that apartment. It was like 6 or 8 of them. So all of them at gunpoint, down on their knees. They were all just getting high inside there. And this was during the crack epidemic. So there was a lot of crack. You could smell it. It's a distinctive smell when someone's smoking cocaine, smoking crack. I'll never forget that smell. So you smelled it strong in there, and they were all high. And to make this a short story, one of the perps that we locked up, and we locked up multiple, was wanted in connection with a homicide that Cutter and the Major Case Squad was working. I got the letter. I actually pulled it out, but I have to disconnect my setup here. But I showed it on one of my live streams, and I talked about it with John when he was on my show, Deputy Chief Cutter. He was a lieutenant at the time. So I bring the collar in, and I'm processing it. And I didn't know he was wanted. They just started working the case. They just got the case. So there was no I-card. There was no want card. There was no arrest warrant for this kid. So when you bring an arrest to the housing, and probably in most commands, we had our own detectives. Housing had their own detectives. So the housing detectives, they came in, and they were like, oh, let's see, because they did the debriefs of all the people you would lock up off the street. So during the debrief of my guy, who I locked up, I found out the next day. I came in the next day, and I was like, why is this guy still here? And they were like, oh, kid, the CO wants to see you. So the commanding officer called me in. And I was like, oh, no, am I in trouble? Oh, I got a bleep machine. I said, oh, yeah. And he was like, hey, Licciardi, sit down. So I sat down, and he's like, Lieutenant Cutter wants to see you at the squad. I was like, oh, man. At that early stage of the game, you couldn't talk to a captain like, hey, what's up? What's around it? You were like, okay. So I was like scared. And I went into the squad. They walked me into the squad because you couldn't just go in there. And I sat down in his office. He's like, hey, I want to congratulate you on a great job. I was like, what did I do? He's like, you locked up a guy that we wanted that murdered somebody. So that was my first arrest. And it was luck of the draw, but I was the one who heard it, and I started the whole storm. So I started that whole storm going down the hallway, and then the field trainers, the training officers took it. So that's my little bit of story for my first collar. It was a pretty good one.
No, it is a pretty good one, because the stories vary. Most of them, they're minor things, loitering, things like that. But that's, listen, inadvertently, but by being alert, you never know what you're going to stumble into. And that's kind of a little bit of broken windows housing style, if you will.
Correct. Correct. You know, and the amount of people that I stopped, questioned, and frisked was tremendous, right? It was a lot of people. But I always said this to even the people of the community, because I attended a lot of the community board meetings, and they were voluntary. You didn't have to go to them. You know, a lot of the community affairs officers were there and commanding officers, you know. So I used to go to them because I wanted to hear what they were talking about. You know, I wanted to hear some stuff, and it was right in the project. So they did these things right in the community center. So it was an easy thing. But I used to say this, you know, for us to be able to effectively do what we got to do, we have to be able to shake the tree up. And if you can't shake the tree up like it is now, look at what you have. You have every time we open up the news or look at the newspaper, it's okay, 6 shot overnight. And this is how it was back then.
Man shoved in front of train.
Yeah, guys, 52-year-old man shoved in front of a train over an argument for a cell phone. So the reason this is able to exist is because the weak, you know, the people that are in charge, the mayor, the governor, letting these criminals run amok. If you give them an inch, they're taking a yard. And that I saw that full circle. I saw it happening in 91. And then when Dinkins left and Giuliani came in, I saw it switch. And then I saw it slowly switch back when Bloomberg came in. Because although Bloomberg, he followed suit with Giuliani because he's not a dummy. He said, you know what? I'm a Democrat, but I'm still going to, and I'm not making it political, but he followed along and he got crap for it. He didn't, he that was not without, you know, stuff. He put up with a lot of pushback, but he said, I'm not going to take something that's working and change it. And then de Blasio came in, and I won't even say anymore.
just to tail it back a little bit, because I remember Pete Forcelli telling me this, you know, and he obviously went on to have a great career with defense with the ATF. If the merge never happened because of how much you guys really grew to love housing, would you still be there? Because a lot of guys tell me they would still be there. They would have went right up until the retirement age.
I have a shirt that says hostile takeover. I didn't want to sign the paperwork to go over to NYPD. I wanted to stay housing. I mean, I didn't want to switch. I had to. They forced us. You know, we had to do it. So did my career excel? Yeah, but would I have been just as happy and staying there? I would have been just as happy. But again, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about growth. It's all about change, right? You can't. For me, I know guys and girls that are cops on the street their whole 20 years. I know cops who, you know, do a couple of years of patrol and then go right into the detective bureau and are detectives for the whole, you know, the whole large part of their career. And that's a good thing. But the bottom line is that you got to do what's right for you. And that's what I say to, like, you know, even the rookies coming up, the new guys. You have to do what's right for, as you guys heard me say, I did what was right for me and my family. Without the support of my wife and my, you know, my mom, my grandmother, my father, you know, I still had a great relationship with my dad, even though he wasn't there. I became friends with him and you know, didn't hold a grudge against him.
That's good.
Don't talk to my sister about that. But if to me and my brother, you know, pretty much we all, you know, came to grips. It was what it was. But if I didn't have the support of my wife, who I'm with over 40 years, and we're married 31 going on 32 years. If I didn't have the support of her, and I didn't, I also drew the line between the boys at work and my family. So I wasn't one of these guys who turned my 4 to 12 into a 4 to 4. I went home to my family and occasionally went out with the boys and girls, and I got stuff for it too. You know, I got you know, kicked around a little bit. Hey, you know, oh, Licciardi, how come you're not coming out? Well, we're all going out tonight. You know, no, I'm going home. You know, so that was the difference. And you know, I'm not saying that I was the hero or a good guy, but I valued my family more than the job because I put that first.
And so many people haven't. And look what's happened to them. They've run into trouble.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a good thing that you did. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure that look at the family unit now. It's strong.
Right.
Exactly. Whereas over time, if you're doing those 4 to 4s all the time, it erodes.
Yeah.
You know? And then you're on the second spouse, and then you're on the third spouse, and then
Yeah, I
maybe
didn't
you're
want to
not
do
as
it.
close with your children.
And I saw my dad, how they got divorced when we were young. And I didn't want that for my kids. Once I had a son, and that happened really quickly after I got on the job, I had my first child right away. Because I was 26 when I started, so I wasn't a 21 or 22-year-old guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a family right away. But, that's the thing, Mike, is like, people that put things first before their family. And that's why with YouTube, I do the same thing. Like some people say, oh, aren't you going to go live? There's this going on. If it's not right in timing for me and my family, my wife has something that she wants me to do or that we are doing together, I will circle back to a YouTube breaking story, and listen, you see some of these people are on YouTube night and day, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. I don't have time to do that. I barely have time to juggle my job that I'm doing right now and my family and YouTube. You know what I mean? That's, it's a tough tightrope to walk. Hey, you got a lot of people in the chat. There's a lot of people. Dr. Ed Moskowitz is here. Matty Boy Sully, Alicia B, Louis Tresco.
Tom Marie's here.
This is almost like I feel like I'm doing a live stream right now. Trucker Steve is here. Alicia B, Blondie 1025. Holy cow. Wow. Thanks everybody for coming.
And if you didn't mention, you probably didn't. I'm sorry. Angie Yang's here as well, and she's also a very loyal supporter of the show. And tell Joe Murray that I said hello because I haven't talked to Joe in a little bit, and I hope he's doing well. I didn't want to go through the names, not because I didn't want to, but because I'm afraid I was going to miss someone. So I'll just say thanks to everyone who's here.
I do it because it keeps them here, Mike. So you got to say hi to them every once in a while.
No, of course, and I do. I always feel bad as I read it, then I realize later, man, I missed this person. And I'll message them on LinkedIn or Facebook. Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to miss
Trust
you.
Me, they get it. They get it that you can't get to everybody because you got a show to do. You got, an outline to follow, and sometimes that could sidetrack you. But some people, they like most of them understand that you can't get to everybody, and the ones that you don't get to, you circle back at the end and say, "Hey, thank you to everybody I came."
Yeah,
so that's how I get around it.
And I definitely appreciate it because, listen, I that's not how I got to 1,000 subscribers, by ignoring them. That's for sure. I always try to make sure that I engage with them as best I can. It's not always easy. And I tell you what, it wasn't until I started doing the show live on StreamYard that I finally understood what you go through and what Bill goes through. Trying to make sure you juggle the chat, juggle the guests. I gained a newfound appreciation for it. It is tough,
Yeah, look, Ryan. Billy Ryan is saying, "What am I, wood?"
Yeah, hey, Billy, and he's always here. He's the guy that helped me start my Bomb Squad miniseries.
He is awesome. He's awesome.
He's great. He's great. There's a guy who's going to work until the day he dies. I tell him, sometimes, hey, take it easy, take a vacation. I'll never take a vacation. Blah, blah, blah. Every time I'm on the phone with the guy, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. So shout out to you, Billy. Thank you for tuning in. But it's interesting. So the merge happens. It's 95, and guys were saying, transit guys and housing guys alike, they were so used to doing things the transit way or the housing way. Now you got to do things the NYPD way. Listen, some of it's obvious, some of it's common sense. It's the same job to an extent, but some nooks and crannies, some procedural things are very different. So as far as that aspect of the job, how long did it take you to get used to the NYPD way?
That is a really good question, Mike. I love that you do your homework. That's what's great about you is you really research the things that you're talking about. And that is some people would miss that if they interviewed me. Let me tell you something. That was a transition that was difficult at best to do. And I'll tell you why. It's many, many fold here. We were processing our arrests, housing and transit separately, away from the NYPD. It was 3 separate police departments. Giuliani now merges them all together in 95. Now, my stuff, any arrest that I made, whether they were insignificant or not, in other words, the needs and wants of each department. Transit was, quality of life. Someone who's on this train, smoking, drinking, urinating, defecating, being disorderly, they would get locked up. They would get summoned, and then if they had a warrant, locked up. And some of them locked up right out. And they would take them back to the transit district. You'd process them. You'd take them to central booking, and you'd meet NYPD guys. We'd all be congregating at central booking, at the central place where we process these arrests. But now, with the merge, I got to bring my perps and my criminals and my bad guys to the 7.5, to the 7.3, to the 7.7, to the 6.9. We had 7 precincts that we covered. 7 NYPD precincts. So in the old days, if I lock someone up in a 7.7, or the 7.3 or 7.5. It didn't matter. I would bring them back to my house, and my bosses would process it. Now we have to get to learn every desk sergeant, every lieutenant, every boss, and they would go, "What is this? What are you bringing me here? Can't you see I got narcotics doing sweep? I got," and they would get so pissed at us, and it would get to the point where we would have to have our bosses come there and start processing our arrests. So now you'd have at the desk 5 sergeants, 1 from transit, 1 from housing, but and our units, our anti-crime units, and all of our everything came to one precinct, or the precinct that we locked the person up in. So that was a very tough struggle, Mike, because of the different attitudes and bosses at these different commands. And some of them, thank God, I got to know them and got friendly with them. I'm not a dummy. I start schmoozing with them, like, hey, you know, and I would bring them like a cigar. I'd bring,
You have to.
Yeah, I'm coming in with 5 under. I got 5 bodies. I got to come in and process it at the 7.3 on a midnight, and I got to go, oh, who's on the desk? And I would call. I would get on my job phone. I'd be like, hey, who's working the 7.5? Yeah, so who's on the 7.3 desk? Oh no, this guy. Oh, I'm screwed. So that was some of the struggles, because now, fast forward, you drop you do your stuff, you do all of your paperwork, you bring him down to central booking. Now the guy goes sick. Central booking is not looking at PSA 2. They're calling the 7.5 or wherever you process them. Like, the guy's sick and he's got to go to the hospital. They don't take him from there. It's not turnkey where you just drop them off and somebody has a problem. They call the 7.5, and now the 7.5, it's more work for the bosses there, because they're dealing with their own overload of people. And don't forget, the day and age that this was all going on, it was massive arrests. The numbers were through the roof. You would lock somebody up for drinking in public, and or these quality of life crimes. You would lock someone up for smoking a blunt on the street in public view. You can't do that back then. Now it's different. So, all of these different projects that we worked in, Pink, Boulevard, Brownsville, Cypress projects, they were off the hook in crime. Shootings, rapes, robberies, murders, everything, you name it, auto stripping. I could just go on and on with the crimes that were there. I chased with my partner on a midnight shots fired call. We chased a perp with a Mac 10. And when we got him, and my partner, thank God he was quicker than me, and I was driving. And I'm like driving alongside, my partner bails out and he's on foot running. I'm with the car up on the sidewalk. And we get the guy, my partner tackles him. I put the car in park. I jump out. We jump on this kid. He was like 13 years old. We couldn't even get the cuffs on his wrist. He was shooting a Mac 10 off in the air, and we got the call. We locked him up. He was 13 years old. The cuffs didn't even fit on his wrist.
He's that big.
No, he was that little. It didn't fit my wrist.
I thought he was big.
The cuffs were just all clicked all the way down. It could come right off.
Wow.
He was that little.
Wow.
13 years old.
13.
Yeah. And, he just was juvie. He didn't even go to jail. 13, you're not going to jail. You're released to your parents. So, yeah.
Where do you even get a Mac 10 at that age? My goodness.
They were readily available. It was probably in his household. It probably wasn't his. It was probably in his household, and he just got a hold of it, But yeah, so.
Some days it felt like you were on patrol in Beirut, I imagine.
It was a mad, mad world. We had ESU in our parking lot to shield us from getting shot at as we were walking to our cars. We had 3 members of the service shot at going to the car at the end of the tour, because Unity Plaza was right behind PSA 2. As a matter of fact, my precinct, Police Service Area 2 in East New York, was attached. Our building was part of a public housing building, which many of the PSAs were like that back then. Now there's, PSA 5 is a freestanding building in Spanish Harlem. There's, tons of PSA 3 is a freestanding building. Lots happened since then. But Mike, then we were in the project. We were in Unity Plaza. So we would have to walk around, and there was all buildings all around where our parking lots were. Our cars were getting damaged. They were getting shot at. They would, people were shooting at the cars from the projects and taking out our windshields. We'd come back to our car, and the windows would be smashed. So yeah, there was a ESU truck that was stationed in our parking lot for our safety at one point.
And back then, you guys in the PSAs, it was funny. I had a guy from Two Truck, Pete Conlon, was telling me this. In his particular area, I forget. I think it's PSA 3 that covers the Harlem area, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Harlem is in Manhattan, so it's PSA 5.
5, okay. Sorry, I got confused.
1, 2, and 3 are Brooklyn, and and then it goes up. PSA 4 is in Manhattan, 5, 6 Spanish Harlem, 7 is the Bronx, 8's the Bronx.
Okay. So the way that it would happen, is that they'd listen to both Patrol for NYPD and, of course, Patrol for Housing. And I laugh because every single time, if it wasn't PSA 5, it was a 3-2, it was a 3-4. Yep, we got a job out there. And the ESU REP would go right out there. Yeah. Because, as you said, it was a mad world back then. And I guess that brings us into 96, because that time frame, it gets overshadowed, I think, this time period, because obviously of what would happen in 2001. But people forget about and this was a point that was brought up by my friend from ESU, Billy Kennedy. People forget about the cops that died before then. And in 96, you had so many of them that not only died, but all of them were shot and killed. Freddie Narvaez was shot and killed, lieutenant, in October. Brian Jones, a former housing cop, was shot and killed 5 days later. Charlie Davis, off duty, was shot. And Vinny Giudice wasn't shot, but he was assaulted. He was pushed into a mirror. And then the first line of duty death before all of them was your friend Kevin Gillespie, a housing guy who was a Marine previously. And the sad part about him is his life did not start off well. He'd really straightened himself out. He'd gotten onto the housing police. He was, by all accounts, not only a decent cop, a decent guy. Some of the guys he arrested said that he was decent to him when he arrested them. And then there's that terrible night in Grand Concourse in 96. Now, we don't have to talk about the night, but just when you look back on Kevin and the guy he was, the great guy he became, what are your fondest memories of him?
I have numerous memories with him because we worked the Midnight Squad together. He was in my squad. So, and for your listening audience, the precinct breakup in the Midnights would be squad 1, 2, and 3. We were squad 1, and then the 2 and the 3 would work, different days with us. And it was, 2 days on, 3 days off. We'd work 5, get 2, work 5, get 3. So it's 2, 3. Wasn't that 9 squad chart. So that was abolished before I started. But so Kevin was in my squad, and I worked with him on a midnight, and he was he came on the job. I was already there 2-3 years. That was it's like a 20-year career. You're working 2 or 3 years on patrol. So he came in as a rookie, but he came in gung ho, a Marine, a fit guy. A guy who wasn't scared to put the handcuffs on. He wasn't afraid to make a collar. I made a lot of arrests. He made a lot of arrests. His partner, Brett Bishop, who became my partner once Kevin was killed, we all made arrests together, and we would spend 15 hours and 25 minutes down in central booking and work right around the clock, straight around. We would call it working around the clock, rocking 15-25. So for the cops who tune into this and watch the replay, they're going to say, 15-25, those dirty blue chairs. We used to put two chairs together and sleep on them, and they were dirty, nasty, roaches all over the place. And we would wait just to get called by the district attorney to get interviewed and do our stuff. But Kevin was that guy. He was friendly. He was over friendly sometimes. He was almost like a guy that you would be like, hey, dude, slow it down, But I liked him because he was a family guy. And my first encounter with Kevin was back in the locker room, and my locker was the first row, and he was in the row. You had to walk down to go down the rows. So they were like, row, and then there was an aisle, and his was along the aisle because he's a rookie. He got the crummiest spot because everyone's got to walk past him. You got to get dressed, and there's no bench there. Like the aisles that went down where you had a bench. I could tell you a funny story about sitting at a bench and a shot whizzing by my head, but I'll get into that later on in the locker room. So Kevin was in the aisle, and he said, hey, and at that time I already had the name DutyRon. That's where my name came from, DutyRon, from work. So Kevin goes, hey, DutyRon, come on over here. I want to show you something. So I was like, what's this? What is he going to show me? I went over there, and he was like, opened his locker, and he said, you see these? And he was a picture of his kids in the locker. It's like, these are my boys. This is my life. This is my life. And I was like, That was a massive takeaway, because that's how I thought with my with my family and everything. I had a kid already, and my second was on the way, actually, when he was killed. But Kevin was about family, and he was about helping people. Like, he actually helped the people he arrested. Got them, soda and chips, and these are all some of the things that I did too. As long as they weren't bad, he, they weren't giving us a hard time. We used to do the right thing by our purpose, because we wanted to drop them off and not have them call the desk and say, "Oh, I'm sick," or or I want to go to the hospital. So we kind of wanted a smooth, easy transaction with our arrests. So we treated them with respect as much as we could, and did what we could to make it, a decent transaction. So Kevin was a good guy. I carried a shield. His widow said when I got promoted that she wanted me to have his shield number and that he would look over me. So my detective shield is 4503. That's his white shield, Kevin, 4503. So, yeah.
And I remember Chief Animal saying to Bill and Mark and to me that one of the things that he had written a letter to Chief Animal, actually, because one of the things he was also about was the safety of his fellow men and women on the street in blue. There it is. For those of you that are going to listen to this and won't watch on YouTube, Ron is displaying the detective shield that he wore. That is also the same numerical shield that Officer Gillespie wore as a officer. He was never a detective, but he was an officer. It's 4503. So thank you for showing that. And he had written a letter saying, listen, let's make sure, basically the gist of the letter was that we have the proper gear to identify ourselves, so that way patrol doesn't think, because this has happened, unfortunately, accidental gunfire, friendly fire, that we are the perps. So even then, he was not only was he a decent, hardworking cop, he was a thinking man's cop too. And it's same thing's true in the fire department. It's always those guys that get cut down early, it seems. The really bright ones that seem to die in the line of duty.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's cliche, but the good guys finish last sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't really think, I think Kevin, was just an aggressive cop, and there's so many of them that were out there during his time and during that era. I was one of them too. I was aggressive, but you never know what the man upstairs has in store for you. And that faithful day up on the Grand Concourse, it was not meant to be. And he died a hero, and I was assigned to that family for that whole. I went to the hospital and saw him on the trauma table with the tubes coming out of him, and his wife was there, and both mayors were there, Giuliani and Dinkins, and it was emotional, to say the least. She was helicoptered in from Lindenhurst, Long Island, and she stood there and didn't even cry. She just stood there and held on to him, and I was amazed by it. His widow, Patty Gillespie, and she is just a warrior and hero herself, because what she went on to do, and supporting survivors of the Shield and the Widows Tellers Group, and all the things that she did for the 9/11 widows and all the widows going forward, is just an amazing testament to how strong of a widow of a police officer she is, and was, and still is to this day. So, you know, uh, I learned a lot fast when Kevin was killed. And there was a lot of fellow men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice before us and going forward after us. But during that time, it really put things in perspective. I almost quit the job when that night he was killed, because I looked at my family and I looked at my life, and I said, is this what I want for them? Do I want my wife to be rushed to a hospital at my bedside? So, Mike, it was a very, very challenging moment for me. And it was more than a few people that helped me push forward and not do it, not quit. But I tell you, I took so much strength from Kevin, and I never knew that his wife was going to tell me to take his shield number and that he would look over me. But she did say that to me. And when she said that to me, I didn't even question it. She wrote the letter to the police commissioner, and he approved it. And I got that badge, and I wore that number, knowing that Kevin was going to look over me, and I made it out through, after that, September 11th, and many other close calls, with myself and with responding to officers killed in the line of duty. Just horrible.
Yeah. And
So,
and that's the thing that when guys talk about from both departments, PD and FD, I just knew it was time to go and this, that, and the other thing, and I'd had enough. But I'm like, you know what? You got there. You got to go down to the pension section. There's a lot of people that never got the chance to do that.
yeah, there's
Unfortunately.
many people that had the chance and were killed, like Pete Fagowski.
Yeah. Louis Miller.
Yeah, they were past their time. So when I hit that 20 going on 21 years mark, for my family and for myself, not to be selfish, I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave. I loved the job. I still love the job to this day. But I said, there's going to be a second chapter for me. And there's going to be a time and a place and an avenue for me to help people. And that's where I segue to my YouTube platform and what I do on there. It's a carry on. It's a continuation, if you will, of my service as a New York City police officer and detective. And I put that strongly in my messages and in my wording of how I deliver my live streams and my videos on YouTube. And looking out for victims and their families is what I did for 2 decades in the trenches, in a war zone. September 11th, police officers being killed left and right. Don't forget, I had my commanding midnight platoon commander, Lieutenant McAuliffe, killed himself over the job, and many others over the way. So it's a tough thing to go through, and many of us come out not well. But I am, because of my wife and my family, and the support system of the men and women that I worked with and that I continue to be friends with, guys like Bill Cannon, Ed Wallace. I mean, Ed is a gem. The guy is so smart, but so humble. And that's what I love about Ed, is that, he brings a whole nother dimension to my show, because I know how to chase people down in the warrant squad. I know how to bang doors, and I know how to tackle people and fight and do what I got to do. But that part of the job, the CSI stuff, crime scene, evidence collection, DNA, that's a science in itself. And I couldn't do that. I didn't. I mean, I could have done it, but I didn't. I didn't have the drive or the want to do it. I wanted to go and get the bad guys, and that's what I did right up until the end, so that's about it.
It's a tremendous outlet because so many people don't have it. They don't know where to put all of that once they go, because it does become your identity after a while. And it's hard to separate the two. I mean, most people are able to do it well. Some people are, as you said, are not able to do it well. But this is an outlet to where, it helps one be at peace to a degree, ironically, because you have a place to put it. And B, it's something that, again, I imagine you feel very fortunate, because most people do not have the outlet that you have, and don't have the same kind of post-job clarity that you've been able to have in the 10 years since you left.
Correct. And that's a fine line that you walk, because no two people are the same. No two people's makeup or psyche or, want or drive or whatever you want to word it. We're all individuals, and that's what makes us special. Each person has different thresholds. I had a very high tolerance and a very strong will to kind of tune out the negative and the bad that I saw. And I tuned in on more of the positive that I did and the positives that I can do going forward, than dwelling on the horror and the doom and gloom that I did witness. And I witnessed a lot of it, Mike, that, we could do a whole 3-hour show on the doom and gloom that I witnessed during the course of my time. But I chose to counter it by bringing in my kids' recycled toys on Christmas Eve and Christmas for the less fortunate, by bringing my wife's high heels and flat top shoes to the girls and the ladies in the projects that didn't have it. bringing old clothes and T-shirts and things of that nature and socks to the people who needed it. And some of the people I worked with are like, these people want to spit on you. They say F the police when you come up. I said, but not all of them say it. And so I didn't have that mentality. My mentality was to see the good in the bad situations that you're in, because every situation could have a potential to turn good. And that's why on YouTube, I help victims' families. I try to help people that are in a bad way just by making contact with them and having conversations. I can't communicate with 145,000 people or 140,000 people. It's impossible. But I pick and choose who I can give myself to, and I do it to the best of my ability. I can't commit to people long term. I try to just touch as many people along the way, just like I did on the job. And I circled back to some of those people and checked up and followed up with them. And they were like, holy cow, I never had a cop follow up with me. It's always I make the call and then they're gone. So that's the difference in how I approach policing. I took it personally because I'm an empath. I feel people's pain, and I try to help alleviate it. I can't take it all away, but I try to do what I can. And that's why on YouTube, I try to be as good as I can with the time that I have. And for the people who hang out with me, they know what I'm about, and again, like I said, it's impossible to do it to the masses, but that's why I have like a website and I have community, tabs, communicate with people by answering their comments. Like answering comments on YouTube, Mike, takes me sometimes in the course of a week, hours to actually answer each person. So some of them I don't get to, but I try my best to communicate with as many. And I try to do what I feel is right, and within my means. And that's really it. I paid so much forward, $15,000 to the billboards for the boys in California that were missing. EquiSearch fundraiser. This is the Gabby Petito Foundation shirt that I'm wearing here. I sent thousands of dollars of viewers' money to the Gabby Petito Foundation for domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we're in October last time I checked. So we try to get around and support the people. I had Mark Class from the Class Kids Foundation. His daughter was murdered in 1993 in Petaluma, California. If you haven't seen that one, go and look that up. Polly Class. I had Mark Class and his whole team on my live stream talking about EquiSearch. The list just goes on and on and on. I try to get myself around people who are like-minded, that want to deliver information and that want to give factual stuff out to the public from a police perspective. And that's what we try to do on Crime Time with DutyRon. And you're doing a great job, Mike. I can't thank you enough for highlighting EMS, fire department, police, newscasters, and the amount of guests that you have had on from police and fire alone. I know the men and women in the fire and the police department here in New York City and across the country. They appreciate what you're doing by highlighting them, because once they retire, their voices are pretty much done, and you're giving them a platform to have their voices heard. And that. Although you might not see it as something tremendous, it is tremendous.
Well, thank you.
So
I appreciate that. And the hour's flown right on by, and it's been a heck of a show. And I thank you immensely. But we'll end as we always end. And you know the show by now, so you know what I'm going to. And that's the rapid fire. It's 5 hit and run questions for me, 5 hit and run answers for me. You can say pass if you want. We'll get right into it. First, I know it's tough, and you don't have to name specific people if you don't want to. You can take a pass. Between housing and the NYPD, favorite colleagues, notice the plural, because I know you just can't name one you worked with.
Yeah, I got a couple of guys. Johnny Comer, a great guy in the Warrant Squad. He's still on the job right now. My former sergeant from the Warrant Squad, Pete Auerbach. I got Brett Bishop, who was my ride or die on patrol. Great guy. A couple of the ladies. I got a really good friend who I keep in contact with. Now I call her Amazing Aunt. She's all over the place. She's a retired sergeant now. Antonella Enriquez, she's unbelievable. I actually saved her from quitting the job. She was handing her gun and shield in, And I went to her house and I sat with her for hours and I talked her out of it. I actually took her gun away from her unofficially off the job, not so the job didn't know about it, but amazing aunt. I love you. I love you. You're the best. So those are some of the folks who I love and still speak with to this day.
There you go. Second, best day you ever had on the job where it just said, listen, I'm really glad I'm on this job.
The best and most proud day obviously was when I became a New York City police officer out in at Madison Square Garden, to coming out to New York, Frank Sinatra. That was like my best day. But I have to say, like, one of my best days per se, and not the best day on the job, was when we got to deliver the babies. I loved going to the jobs where babies were delivered. I delivered over 5 babies while I was on the job, and that's, to me, is a good day. That's a really darn good day.
I would say I'm laughing because there's a frequent guest here in the chat, or a frequent viewer, I should say, in the chat, Joe Maliga, who's a retired correction officer. That's him and I's running joke. Anytime I get a fireman or a cop on, did you ever deliver a baby? He always asks. So that's a little running gag we have. So I know he's going to be happy with that answer.
It's a good one.
It is. It is. Third, funniest call. If it's not clean, you can tell me off. The funniest call you ever responded to.
Funniest call. I had a guy who broke into his significant other's home, had a drug problem, and stole some stuff from her. We actually caught him red-handed. It was when I was in the target offender program. So I was in plain clothes at the time, and we caught him red-handed in her apartment, and we locked him up. And when we were bringing him into the 7-5 before the desk, and that was again during that little crazy time where the lieutenants were like, we don't like you bringing your stuff in here. And the guy was a tobacco, but he was saying out loud in front of the desk, and narcotics had like lines of perps ready to be processed behind us. And he was like, I swear, word up to my dead goldfish, I didn't do it. He was saying, word up to my dead goldfish. And that always stuck with me going forward. I actually say that to this day to my brother, because my brother worked in that command as a sergeant. And it was just funny because every detective and all the people who were there, and even the lines of perps that were being processed, were cracking up about that. He kept saying, Lieutenant, word up to my dead goldfish, I didn't break in there. We caught him red-handed. He was in the apartment. There's no getting around it. But it was funny. It was funny.
Oh my goodness! If you put it on the goldfish, he's serious.
Yeah.
Dead goldfish. Dead goldfish at that. Fourth, of course, you are a long-suffering Mets fan, and I sympathize. I wish you guys would have gotten past the Padres. Dead goldfish at that. Oh, hang on, I'm hearing some feedback. You are a long-suffering Mets fan.
I just did something. Right. I had the show on the other monitor, and I unmuted it. So go ahead, Mike. Say it again.
No problem. So I'm saying you're a Mets fan.
That was a rookie mistake.
No problem. You're a Mets fan, of course, a long-suffering one at that. And even though I'm a Yankee fan, I'm going to watch Game 5 later against the Indians. I don't root against the Mets. I like to see them do well. So I really wish you guys would have gotten past San Diego. But nevertheless, top 5 favorite Mets of all time.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I have a lot of favorite Mets. And Joe is in the chat, the guy you were just speaking about. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. Thanks, Joe. So I hope you subscribe to the channel here. Well, he subscribed here. I hope he subscribes to my channel.
Check out DutyRon, Joe. He's good.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. All right. So 5 favorite Mets. I wrote it down because I really, I looked at this one because this one was important to me. Willie Mays, center fielder, 69 Mets, right? Mm-hmm. Willie Mays was one of my favorites as a kid growing up. I saw that catch in my mind over and over and over again. My dad was a Mets fan. Thanks, Dad. Buddy Harrelson, shortstop, the fight with Pete Rose.
Yep.
How can you forget that, right? I love Rusty Staub, right fielder for the Mets. I love Rusty because of all the good he did for the police and the widows and children's. He did his fundraiser year after year. And Rusty Staub, God may rest his soul, he's a great human being. He was a great person and a tremendous athlete as well. Tommy Seaver, the pitcher for the Mets, right? Tom Seaver, terrific Tom. Who cannot love terrific Tom? He passed away recently. So, and the face of the franchise, David Wright. My niece, my goddaughter, who is expecting her first child, my sister said that David Wright was supposed to be her husband. He was supposed to marry my niece, according to my sister. But yeah, so those are my 5. I could go on and on and on. Dwight Gooden, who was a great guy. I mean, I gave you my 5. Those are my 5s from every position on the field, with the exception of second base and third base, because I need 9 in catching. I need 9. You should have asked me 9 questions. I could have given you a whole field.
Well, Gardo Alfonso, Mike Piazza. I'm going 90s Mets.
Pizza delivery.
Pizza man.
I like
know,
Jerry.
listen,
I like Jerry Grody better than Mike Piazza.
Ah, really? I will say, even though I'm a Yankee fan, I'm a student of baseball, so I love the old school teams. I'm a 90s guy in that sense, those 1999, 2000 teams. So I love Ray Ordonez. I love John Olerud. Who should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. I mean, he's a heck of a hitter. I mentioned Alfonso. Al Leiter, who was also a Yankee.
Hernandez.
Yep. Carlos Beltran too. He also a Yankee. Love Beltran. And Curtis Granderson. I love that guy.
You know what I loved about Curtis Granderson, and I saw him. He's doing the TBS show.
Great Met, great Yankee.
So he would put his glove on the top of his head and sign autographs right almost till first pitch. He was the last Met or probably Yankee out on the field signing the little kids' autographs, and I loved that about him, because most of the players, they'd have that little session and then they would go. He was the last one with the glove on top of his head, signing with the glove sitting on his head. I have pictures of him. I love Mike Cameron too, center fielder for the Mets.
Oh yeah.
What I loved about Mike Cameron is that he gave a bat and gloves to both my kids. Wow. And that was just an unbelievable thing. We had on-field access behind home plate, and he did. He's a tremendous guy. I love the athletes who give back. Like I don't like the ones that don't like to sign the autographs and like to keep themselves from the very people who are there paying the admission price to pay their salaries. So it is what it is. A lot of people still in the chat. Trucker Steve still here. Lieutenant Pete Pranzo, Anthony Candela is corrections upstate New York. There's a lot of people from my squad here. Hope you guys all subscribe to this podcast here, Mike Colón's YouTube channel, Mic'd Up in New Haven. So yeah, it's a good one.
And thanks to everybody, like I said, that is tuning in so far. And Lieutenant Pranzo, he is always here. He's a big-time supporter of the show, former 2-time guest of the show as well. So we'll end with the 5th question of the rapid fire. And that is, listen, actually, Academy class just graduated. So if you were at that ceremony, you can grab one of the guys and gals that just came on the job officially with that graduation. Given your experiences, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, it would be a tough conversation, to be honest with you, because my own son was going to become a New York City police officer and was all ready to go, and he backed out because of the climate that we have nowadays. It's this anti-police sentiment. And what I would say to someone coming out of the academy is, stay positive, stay alert, make sure you learn the best that you can to keep yourself safe, first and foremost, and the public safe. Listen to, some of the people who have wisdom and that are talking sensible to you, because there's a lot of cynics and a lot of negative people in all trades. Stay away from that negativity, because it will be a cancer. It'll eat you alive. So that would be some of the conversation. They tell them to stay positive, stay safe, and stay up to date on the laws and all of your training. Because when you get in the academy, they tell you all of this stuff. But when you get out of the academy, they say, hey, kid, just forget about all that stuff that you learned. This is how we do it here. So pay attention when you get to the precinct to some of the good, reputable folks that are there, and try to stay away from the cynics, because they will drag you down. Again, misery loves company. Stay away from the miserable people. Stay close to the people like Kevin Gillespie, guys like myself that were positive and that took the positives away from these negative situations.
Love it. And to our 4th question, the rapid fire, Gary Carter, Don Reed says the late great Gary Carter was great as well. He was a great player, Gary Carter, big part of those 86 Mets. Thank you for mentioning him, Don. And thank you, Don, for always being here. I know I've missed you in the chat lately, nothing personal. Like we were talking about earlier, it's just hard to keep up. But thanks, Ron. This was great. Stick around. We'll say goodbye off the air. Just before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs you want to give besides the YouTube channel, of course?
Yeah. I want to just say thank you to you, Mike, for having me on, and all of the great people. As I said before, I want to reiterate that how important it is to have a purpose when you retire. And it doesn't matter if you're a police, fire, a nurse, doctor, lawyer, any career. Once you retire, it's a tough transition, because you always look to have some type of something to do, whether you become a member of a book club or, you know, get together with the retirees and things of that nature. So stuff like this is important. I want to shout out to all of the retirees and all the people who watch, not just your show, but Crime Time with DutyRons and all the great shows that are out there. I'm thankful that you, when we go live and we hit that go live button, that you guys are here. So I want to say thank you to, again, you said not to say it to my YouTube audience, but that's who are here and are watching. I want to say thank you to them for always supporting me and the people who I support as well. You know, you guys are what makes this whole thing great to do, because without you, we would have nothing. So thank you to you guys for being here.
I'm never anti a YouTube channel. I'm pro that. That's for sure. I know that's. I'm glad you did it.
I wasn't saying you were.
No, I know.
That's, you asked me who I want to say thank you to, and that's who I want to say thank you to.
No, and I appreciate that, because it's true. I mean, listen, I didn't get to 1,000 subscribers just by, you know, my own doing. It's because, you know, people were nice enough to care about this show, and look at your show, your channel as well, over 100,000 subscribers. It's without the audience, doesn't matter what you do, any kind of content creation, you need an audience, and I'm very thankful to that audience, and I know that you're thankful to your audience too, and you hit the nail on the head. So well said, and like I said, stick around. We'll say goodbye off the air. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, I don't know if I'll have anyone tonight for 7 o'clock. If I do, you'll see me for that show. I'm scrambling to find someone.
Come back again.
But if I don't, in the event that I don't find somebody for tonight's show, you'll see me Friday. No problem. For volume 24, for those of you that are new, I have a mini series. I have a few mini series on the show, but one of them is the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, and Sergeant Ken Colón.
I'm helping you out.
I appreciate it. Who was a police officer, and then later on, Sergeant in the Emergency Service Unit will join me. I think he was a semi-truck guy, so he'll be here for that one, volume 24, the E-Men, on Friday, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So in the meantime, on behalf of Ron Licciardi, I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Thanks for a great show, Ron. Thanks to you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys maybe later or maybe Friday. Take care.
Thank you.